been talking with hundreds of organizations that have either just started working on the process, others who've been delaying it for years, others that have been tackling it for years, and basically everyone sees a lot of challenges with getting a grip on your processes. It's quite elusive. We feel like there's so much value in it, but it's so hard to understand, like, where do I get started? What are the small steps that I need to take to get value from the process components? So at Whale, we decided to help you out. We decided to tackle the biggest challenges we see when it comes to processes, not only about creating processes, also managing them and then sharing them with your team. Obviously, it connects to having your core processes documented and followed by all, like EOS shares with you. But we just wanted to make sure that technology has its place in that specific components, and that's basically what Whale does. It helps organizations with creating, managing, and sharing processes. And today, I just want to share with you a lot of lessons learned. We'll not be talking about the tool, we'll not be talking about Whale, but I'll be talking about 10 mistakes made when documenting processes. Thank you, Leah, for bringing them up. I'll just head right into the first one, and probably the most important one. So what we see, and this is probably the biggest hurdle to getting started, is that a lot of organizations see this huge mountain ahead of them when starting with documenting their core processes. It's the reason why they're hanging their hiking boots at the front door without even opening the door. It's because it just seems so daunting, right? It's like this massive amount of work that nobody knows how to approach, nobody knows how to climb it. And that's where the problem starts. We're seeing it as a mountain, while in reality, if you prioritize, if you look at the high impact things that you can do with processes, it's more of a hill than a mountain. And this is one of the biggest mistakes we see all the time. When we think about documenting processes, we think that we need to document every single process in the organization, and we need to have them documented all at once and then share them with the team. The reality is that you can make a lot of impact by just selecting those few processes that potentially give the biggest impact to your team. And there's actually quite a lot of tips to identify them. One of the probably easiest way to look at where to start is to look at repetitive questions, right? What are people constantly referring back to? What are you getting spammed with by email? What is flooding your Slack channels with the same questions over and over again? That's probably a good place to start, right? If people keep asking the same things on how to do things or how things connect in your organizations, start there. If you see customers complain over and over again in a specific area of your business, potentially like customer service, you know this is where you can make big changes. This is the place where you want to start. What I'm getting at is prioritization is going to be the key to just getting started. And even if it's only like one process, it's that one step forward. It's that first small hill that you've climbed, and it's much easier than trying to climb that mountain. All right, second mistake. You forget to explain the why, right? We tend to think as process documentation as the what and the how. And that's fine, but if you really want to get your team behind the processes, if you really want to have them to follow them, you need to explain why they matter. And so basically, you'll find people that you can present a what and a how, and they will follow diligently. But your A players are going to want to understand, like, why are we doing it this way? Why is this better? Why is this going to improve me? How is it going to make me more efficient, more productive? In the end, we're all a little bit egocentrical. So we all tend to think in terms of what's in it for me. Well, make that clear. Explain that why and make sure that they understand it. Third mistake is, and it kind of connects back to mistake number 2, is you're not getting feedback from those who execute. While it's important to communicate the why, it's also important for those who need to follow it to be able to give suggestions, recommendations, and getting feedback from them. We are not all knowing. While we are probably all integrators or visionaries, we do not know how every little small detail works in our organization. That's why we're hiring people. That's why we delegate. Well, make sure that your employees who execute on a daily basis get a voice, that they actually get that platform in which they can flow back feedback, recommendations, suggestions, and that will help get into that continuous improvement flow. So just make sure that they are heard, because you'll find so much valuable gems from them, which will make a huge difference. Mistake number 4 is you're only letting your managers write your procedures. We tend to think as the managers being the people who lead the team. Obviously they are, but in a team you also have subject matter experts, potentially senior staff that is doing a kick-ass job in a specific role in your business, but it's not a manager. So why would you not value what they know? Why would you not go and find the knowledge in each and everyone's head and utilize that, again, to make sure that you're building that foundation in which you can further grow the business on? We tend to see in a lot of organizations that there's so much tribal knowledge going on. So much things are being passed on from one person to another. And it's in our nature to do so. But instead of just doing it by word of mouth, create a habit of writing these things down and give everyone the opportunity to contribute as well. Number 5 is that you believe that processes stifles creativity. I've had a conversation with one of our customers who is running a big agency, and they do a lot of creative work in the ad space. And I asked them, and when we had a first conversation, I asked them, like, aren't you afraid that, because it is a common mistake, aren't you afraid that if you go into too much detail and too much of processes, that people will feel like restricted in their creativity? And this person had it right from the start. She said, Gary, if I create a framework in which people feel supported, in which they feel guided, it's going to boost creativity, because they're receiving this comfort zone in which they can really express themselves. And it's not stifling, it actually opens doors. It allows for more headspace to be more creative, and it kind of removes all of the friction that would otherwise potentially stifle the creativity. So it's quite the opposite. And I just see too many businesses out there thinking that we're in the creative space, we do not need processes. I would definitely disagree on that one. All right, number 6 is about not assigning ownership. And so there is a lot of ownership to go around. I think the most important piece when it comes to ownership and process documentation is with who's responsible for this process, not only in your business, but also who's responsible for reviewing it, who's responsible for keeping it up to date. And so while we tend to focus a lot of effort on getting it documented, we tend to forget that our business keeps evolving, that our processes keeps evolving, we keep improving. And often we forget that the documentation should be being kept up to date as well. But if you don't have ownership, there's kind of this gap where this lives, right? Like, who is going to take up that responsibility? And often it's one person who will own it, and it's just too much work. So if you go and assign ownership on specific areas in your business, and you make sure that you have a system behind it to review it periodically, make sure that the right people in the right seats is assigned owner on the specific topic, you'll make sure that people can trust that what you've written out for them is actually accurate, that it's relevant, and that it has not become stale or that they need to look for, like, is this the final version? Is this 7.2, or is this actually the one that we've recently updated? Mistake number 7 is about not leveraging documentation to its full potential. So often we look at documentation as a way to bring clarity to our team on what is expected of them, about creating that big picture. We tend to see it as a great source for onboarding and training, which you definitely should leverage, right? If a new hire joins, process documentation has so much value in ramping them up more efficiently and making them feel supported from day one, because they've chosen to join your team. And if you're showing them that, hey, we've put in efforts to make sure that you're going to be successful in ramping up and joining and understanding what we're doing here, they're going to have a great first impression. But you can go much further than this. And this, again, is something that came up while talking to one of our customers. And I really love this. She was referring back to process as a way to, first of all, maintaining culture. She said, for me, processes and culture go hand in hand. The way we write our processes, they start from how we approach our business. We have core values. And the way we think about processes is the way we think about our organization as a whole. And they try to instill every piece of documentation with those core values, with that culture in mind. Additionally, when they do IDSs, what they do is to kind of take out the emotional elements when you discuss specific issues, is they revert back to the process. They're like, wait a minute, we're talking about this. What's the process that we've written up on this specific issue? Let's go back there and objectively look at it and use that as a better way to resolve what we're discussing. So try and think about what and where documentation processes can help you improve. Mistake number 8 is that, and this happens everywhere. People, well, you think that your employees are going to dig into folders to find what they need. And this is the first thing that people tell me, like, Gary, we have documents, we have training resources, we have all of our SOPs, and they are sitting in a Google Drive and nobody's looking at them. Or they're in our SharePoint, but basically no one knows where to find them. There's been research that shows that if your employees are not finding the information they need within 10 to 12 seconds, they tend to give up. And maybe they'll try once more afterwards, but after that, they just give up. And the issue with folders is that, well, we're all accustomed to a folder system. We all know that in folders, there's subfolders, and then you tend to create even more folders, and information tends to get buried. And I tend to ask, like, who in your organization understands your folder structure? And then that's when people start laughing, like, yeah, probably the person who set it up, but even him or her is I don't think they would find what they need. So don't make it hard on them to find what they need. Make it easy, make it visible, make sure that you use it in your L10 meetings, make sure that it's in front of them, and make it under 10 seconds, because inherently we are lazy. We are always looking for the shortest route. And to be honest, a folder system is not the shortest route. The shortest route is, hey, I'm just going to ask Mark here, who's sitting next to me, and tap his shoulder. Oh, let me just spam Slack and ask all those questions there. It's much easier than go to SharePoint. So definitely not the way to go. Mistake number 9 is a lot of companies out there are not utilizing the benefits of technology. You can do so much. You can win so much time. You can automate so much things these days with technology that I'm hoping not a lot of you still have that physical binder sitting on a drawer somewhere. I come across them once in a while, and I tend to ask, like, where do these folders and binders go? And the most common answer is, well, I think it serves as like a door stopper somewhere. or it's catching dust in one of those drawers, like a physical binder, we're all accustomed to finding things on our smartphone. Don't, again, make it harder for your employees, and make sure that it's modern, it's good looking, and it's easy to use. Mistake number 10 is, frankly, that most of process documentation tends to be boring and employee unfriendly, like we call it. I'll be the first to admit that process documentation is not the sexiest thing out there. It's probably not what you get most excited about. It's not what you're jumping out of bed for in the beginning of the day, but it's so important. And if you're expecting your employees to read them, to go through them, if you're going to use them as training and onboarding resources, make them engaging. Use small things like GIFs, right? It seems silly, but like a GIF once in a while in your documentation makes for like a boost of going through the next chapter. Turn to video as a way to make it easier for them to follow maybe a process in one of your tools. So try to avoid making documents, and I came across one that really was the most boring thing I ever found, a 750-page operational manual that they expected everyone to read. I'm pretty sure no one ever did, but just make sure you're on the lookout for this. And this was my top 10 mistakes for documenting processes. As I mentioned in the beginning, we're a software tool that basically helps you with all of these, or avoid you making all of these top 10 mistakes. Feel free to go through the resource. Hopefully it comes in handy as you still get started. Otherwise, connect on LinkedIn or reach out through Slack. I'm in there as well. Thank you for listening, everyone.